Hey everyone, what up? Matt Kaiser here, and welcome to also my second episode of my Ninja Gaiden 2 review marathon with, well, funnily enough, Ninja Gaiden 2 itself. Now, after the critical and commercial success of Ninja Gaiden 1 Black on the original Xbox, as was even base Ninja Gaiden, it was obvious that a sequel was in the works, and a good time even to make it for the next generation of hardware, which was, of course, the Xbox 360, which, by the way, it's now 20 years old. Coupled with the fact that also Team Ninja also released Dead or Alive 4 as a launch title that same year as well Ninja Gaiden 1 Black, it was already planned with Itagaki returning to take the reign once again as both director and producer, where the game would be unveiled in September 2007 at the Tokyo Game Show during Microsoft's showcase, despite initial leaks happened before that. With this revealing to be an Xbox 360 exclusive, saying from Itagaki, "Now please enjoy the world's best action game running on the world's best hardware." And oh boy, what a trailer it was, alright?
Restore honor to his clan. He seeks justice for the fallen.
As for the development side and direction for this, it's quite something. Now, there were initial plot details and concepts would actually have it focused on human-created bioweapons, where the military would create fused humans with monsters, granting them partial immortality, which would harken to the plots of the likes of the original Ninja Gaiden 3, the Ancient Ship of Doom, Ninja Raikuden, and, well, Ninja Gaiden 3 itself even. Though that aspect changed greatly in the final product, and it would even release upon also having a demo on the same date as the full game's launch. Upon that, however, things started to go a bit sour for both Itagaki and Tecmo, with the game being pushed out of the gate to meet with the deadline in order to claim promised bonuses for both this and Dead or Alive 4. However, that never came to be, and with him, well, it led him to famously sue Tecmo in 2008, after resigning and alleging that the company itself withheld promised bonuses, which is around $1.4 million, citing a breach of contract and as well as bad faith from then President Yoshimi Yasuda, a dispute that ended the whole mutual sentiment in 2010. And that dispute alone made Itagaki leave Tecmo and take a good staff of Team Ninja with him to make their own brand studio instead. Ninja Gaiden will release on June 3rd, 2008, to a rather strong positive reception, with an 81 on Metacritic and even selling 1.1 million units worldwide in December that same year, with many giving praise to its combat, difficulty, and its sweet level of violence and gore. However, there was also criticism for mainly its lack of innovation and, well, rushed aspects. Then a year later, just like with Ninja Gaiden 1, Ninja Gaiden 2 would also get a reworked version called Ninja Gaiden 2 Sigma for the PlayStation 3, which would also have some quality of life features, as well as new playable characters. Though, other aspects were both cut and, well, changed really. And that would also, like with Ninja Gaiden 1, would also be in the Master Collection. And then, after that, around January 25th, 2025, during around the Xbox Developer Direct, right when Ninja Gaiden 4 was announced, Team Ninja would also reveal Ninja Gaiden 2 Black, which would serve as a remakester, using both Unreal Engine 5 and taking both the best aspects of the original 360 version as well as Sigma 2 into one, while cutting some aspects, and then it would Izuna drop on both the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, and PC that same day it was revealed. However, for this review alone, we'll be looking at the original Xbox 360 version, being once again played by backwards compatibility through my One S, though we'll eventually get to the other versions in the future. But with all that said, let's jump off a building, ride on a motorcycle, and wield our dragon sword once more, as we head straight into Ninja Gaiden 2. So the story has our main hero, Ryo Hayabusa, appear in Tokyo, when he saves CIA agent Sonya after she's been recently kidnapped by the Black Spider clan. She warns him that they teamed up with the Fiends and have come to steal the demon statue at the Hayabusa village. Which, yep, I already told you guys that something bad would happen at that place, all the time even. After a battle with Genshin, leader of the Black Spider clan, the fiends take the statue with the plan to resurrect the all-powerful Archfiend. And so, Ryu travels in her pursuit around the world to reclaim the statue. And along the way, he will come across various fiends, as well as Black Spider ninjas, to stop him, and occasionally team up with his newfound ally to prevent the Archfiend's revival. And that's the story, and just like with the first one, it's whatever really, it's fine, as it's basically just a globe-trotting adventure, and mind you, some parts in the whole story just feel a little bit less cohesive than even the first game. Like, one aspect, how do we go from Hayabusa village on one level, then all the way to New York? Opposed to, say, on the first game, where it will show you cutscenes of how Ryu traveled from Hayabusa village to Taiwan. As well as even Sonya just pops here and there randomly. Upon all that, it's all about just trying to save the world and kill the next enemy that gets in the way. Though, admittedly, there are still some cool moments that still feel personal, as like in Ryu's vendetta from the last game. And even some certain side characters get involved, which does raise the stakes a bit. But overall, while the story itself is nothing to note about, really, as for characters, it really shines. Most notably when it comes to Ryu, who once again is a badass, but here, he shows more edge, and even spouts some really cool one-liners here, and even just absolutely decimate his foes with these lines here.
Such is the fragility of evil. That wasn't in my history book. I don't care. Genshin, go back to hell.
Damn! Ryu don't give a fuck! But even then, with those savage roasts that would even make Jack Garland do a fist bump with him, deep down he's still compassionate towards his allies. And underneath his mask, we do feel his sorrow, especially regarding his own father. As for the side characters, well, the new addition would have to be Sonya, who's the main heroine, and well, just like Rachel, she's pretty cool. Except for that one part at the end, but that is spoiler territory which we'll not get into. We even also get to see Ryu's own dad, in the actual flesh even. And even the shopkeeper Muramasa even has a few more scenes. However, it's the actual villains themselves that get an increase in terms of writing quality, especially both the Greater Fiends and Genshin, with the former having their own distinct personalities as well as even their cool designs. Like Alexei here being more theatrical, Wolf seeking a worthy opponent, and Zidonius caring more about the hierarchy of fiends above man. And the latter, that being Genshin, being a formidable rival, and having some really more cool interactions with Ryu that really sparks an interesting dynamic. And while admittedly Doku from the last game was more imposing, I think I do prefer Genshin overall, as he has his own stake on why he sided with the fiends for the sake of his own clan. And as for the other ones, like Elizabeth, she's more cunning and devious. When it comes to the actual voice acting, it's actually pretty good, with a lot of the characters being performed by very talented people in the industry, with of course the best Spider-Man himself, Josh Keaton, voicing Ryu in this, as well as also the likes of Neil Kaplan as Genshin, and Grey DeLisle as Elizabeth, alongside Kari Walgren as Sonya.
Wolf! Invincible ruler of storm!
That he should consider the consequences, blah blah blah.
Overall, while the story may be again whatever, with even more hype moments and aura, it's still entertaining to watch regardless, and still packs some really nice moments even still. Now we get on to the graphics, and I have to say, this game still looks pretty good, with obviously all the models being well detailed, and a big upgrade, especially with the likes of Ryu, and well, a certain other character.
Yes! Yes!
And the same can be said for a lot of the levels, with a lot of them being varied and based on, well, real life locations, especially the cherry blossoms here in Sky City, Tokyo. The UI also looks really good too. However, one nitpick I do feel is that the later levels do suffer from being a little bit too grey and even brown a bit. So it does make some bits feel a little bit dull in that regard. And while I know it's not as graphically impressive compared to the first game, for what it is, it still looks pretty nice. Now as for performance, especially on my Xbox One S, it does still run at a good near perfect 60 FPS, with only just a couple of frame drops, but not much so that ruins gameplay. However, a good test of being amazed by the performance is the rather infamous Stairs of Doom during Chapter 10, where you have multiple enemies on screen at once. And while the last bit did slow down the gameplay, it was still tolerable and bearable. Which is more than I can say about it playing it on its original hardware. However, there's also one aspect, but we'll get to that soon enough. Oh boy, we'll get to that soon enough indeed. But even still, Ninja Gaiden 2 is still a neat looking game. Now we get on to the meat of the game. So Ninja Gaiden 2 plays similar to its predecessor, with many of the core mechanics and overall combat flow remaining intact, so I'm not going to repeat myself. However, I'll mention the new bits, and the only difference here is both the game and combat speed feel a lot much more faster, which leads to Ryu's attacks and combos feeling both very fast and very fluid. However, there are also some new additions also being added, and to be honest, it's quite a lot. Going from the things like the improved quality of life features, with using items and weapons mid-battle during this new menu, as well as also Ninpo itself, having new spells, but also having the ability to lock on multiple enemies before firing. Upon that, alongside the block and countering, there's also Reverse Wind, which is a new form of dodging. However, the real new juicy addition to Ninja Gaiden 2 would have to be the dismemberment system, where your attacks can now delimb foes, from cutting their legs off to even their arms and even heads, and now leaves them vulnerable enough to perform an obliteration technique, thus insta-killing them. And that gives you incentive to either kill them faster or still kill them with the regular combos. And these animations for every weapon as well as each enemy look just downright sick, much like the finishers in God of War, or better yet, the glory kills in Doom. Oh yes. Upon that, techniques like the Izuna Drop, Blind Swallow, and Guillotine Throw are now added into Ryu's base kit already. And speaking of techniques, there's also the ultimate technique of Essence. Where if you perform an ultimate while Essence is still floating around, you'll be able to perform a level 2 ultimate technique much faster than your regular charging. Not only that, but even projectile weapons like the shurikens and bows come with their own ultimate techniques as well. Upon that, there's also of course new weapons, like the Scythe, the Kurosai Gama, and my absolute favorite here, the Falcon Talons. As well as even old weapons like the Flails even return, which are still my favorite even. Another new mechanic also comes in the form of your health, where the more damage you take, your max HP will decrease, and it can all be restored by doing things like getting blue essence, or even buy elixirs, or even now go to save points that can now heal and save you. So it really encourages you to try not to take too much damage, especially when it comes across hordes of foes, which perfectly transitions again to the enemies, where in this game are about even double or even triple the count than what the first game even had, with a lot of them even feeling more aggressive and relentless that they downright want to kill you even, which also makes the encounters both chaotic but also really challenging, most of the time that is, admittedly, with ranging from things like the Black Spire Ninjas to even more fiends like the Vangelfs, werewolves, and even centipedes, and the return of the Ghostfish. Though thankfully they are nerfed, so it's all good here. And just like the last game, these encounters will test you to the point that you would die a lot. But more so on testing your reflexes and skills, with the weapons as well as techniques and nimpo that can help you pull some devastating combos on them. Especially the good old Izuna drop.
Fatality.
Yeah, that never gets old. It's absolutely amazing. Though yeah, oh no, the gameplay and combat in this game is just so damn good, and still maintains on what was good about the last game, just now smoother and faster. Which thus makes this my favorite combat system in the series as a whole thus far, and even one of my favorite character action games in general even. But unfortunately, I am very sad to report there are still a couple of drawbacks in this. Once again, the camera just sucks. I mean, the camera just really sucks this time, with it zooming all over the place, and oftentimes it will leave you to what I call off-screen command grabs. Another gripe would also have to be is the bouncing towards mob fights, where sometimes it can feel very tough, but also times it can lead to very spammy explosive shurikens stomaching you to death before you even have time to react. Upon that, there's also the infamous glitches that both visually and affect gameplay, with these fiends air grabbing you, or these worms spawning repeatedly, which is very annoying. And speaking of absolutely annoying, the absolute worst thing in this, sadly, once again, is the bosses. And debatably, some of them are even worse than they were in the first game even, with some of them suffering from the same problems, though thankfully it's mostly due to the fact that due to the rush nature of this game, some of them just feel either too gimmicky, or just downright boring, or annoying, with little to test of your own skill. And there's even a few others that try to prove to be a decent challenge, but only for them to be an absolute wuss at the end. Things like the Giga Death, the two flying dragons, the armadillos, and the last two penultimate bosses are just so terrible. However, there was one boss in particular that was so bad, so broken, so annoying, so boring, and just such utter bullshit that later versions of this game would straight up remove it. And that is the Death Room. And it fucking sucks in every fucking way. Fuck this thing. Honestly, just terrible. And as for the other bosses, when you come across the first fights against, well, Tetsu, Alexei, and even both fights with Wolf, they feel like absolute frauds in that matter, as your attacks will more likely melt their HP like butter. It's just downright embarrassing. And mind you, I played this on Warrior, which is said to be hard mode, so it says a lot when the encounters have a lot more going than the actual bosses. I know it's a common trend for this series, but man, just think of the potential and how much it's been wasted. However, not all is bad here, because just like with the first game, there are still some good bosses here, with some of them actually being hard and actually even test your skill fairly even. The first one would have to be the fight against Zidonius for his first fight, and then of course you even have the second fight with Alexei, who was a much better test of skill even. But the absolute best fights in this game would undoubtedly be the showdowns between both Elizabeth and especially Genshin, with their attacks being both aggressive and relentless, but fun to counter and learn, and actually have good openings. Genshin's multiple encounters are just an absolute highlight in this. But unlike say Doku, Genshin's fights are much more consistent, even to his last very fight, which was an absolute great way to end his whole rivalry. It's fights like these that make me wish that the whole boss lineup could have matched entirety like that. But then again, due to likely the issues this game had due to its rushed development, even Itagaki even admitted on how he wished that the game could have been a lot better, especially if they had more time and got what he owed, especially towards chapter 3. So at the very least, I can understand what he means, and so I'm not going to throw this game over the bus too much even. But even still, despite all of that, and I mean all of the flaws this game has, the combat in Ninja Gaiden 2 is still fantastic. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Now we get on to the level design, and as for the rest of the gameplay. For the movement and general physics, it's noticeably a lot better and much more smoother, especially when it comes to both wall running as well as performing acrobatics during platforming. But when it comes to levels, they're noticeably a lot more linear, with only just having a few alternate pathways where you can collect your various items, weapons, and as well as even your crystal skulls. And there's only just very few puzzles. But mostly, that's pretty much it, as the bulk of Ninja Gaiden 2 is just mostly the tough encounters. And that will be something that will become a standard, especially towards later entries. And even Ninja Gaiden 1 Sigma even took notice on. At the very least, the levels in Ninja Gaiden 2 offer more variety based on the locales. But yeah, it's pretty much up to preference really. As while I do enjoy the combat encounters and each level being distinct, I do miss a bit of that whole Metroidvania style from the first game, and some puzzles in that did at least add some variety and a nice break from the actual fights. Now we get on to the music, and it's honestly pretty solid, with having some very atmospheric and dramatic tracks here playing throughout the levels, with having a sense of urgency and that you're in for some really tough encounters, while also adding some nice rock in the mix. Some levels just overall sound nice, and we get some really cool boss themes, especially Genshin's that stands out completely. So as always, here's a listen. Now as for the content, there's still a decent amount, but the obvious thing to encourage is to replay the levels on high difficulties to get much better scores. And as for DLC, there's mission mode like the last game, with having various missions facing against tougher enemies and the bosses themselves, as well as also having custom DLCs, and as a full-on treat, a full-on documentary involving the development of this game led by Itagaki himself, which is both nice and touching. Even though you can just, watch it free on YouTube right now, much like the Dead Alive 4 teaser from the last game. But still, it's pretty nice. A standard playthrough for this game can average around 14 to 17 hours, depending on how well you do. But if you want to do everything, you'll get an extra 10 more hours, which alone makes it quite juicy. Even if this game is noticeably shorter than it was from the last game. But then again, this is the base vanilla version, so that still makes sense. So with that, how is Ninja Gaiden 2? Well, simply put, believe it or not, I really love this game. So much so that I think I preferred over Ninja Gaiden 1 Black. Now, make no mistake, Ninja Gaiden 1 Black is still a fantastic game, and has aged well for the most part, and it's still both polished and well balanced, and still has both high acclaim and a lot of relevance, opposed to this just having at least one appearance in House MD. But, however, Ninja Gaiden 2 has better combat, a lot more quality of life features, and as well as the improved gameplay movement as well as physics and streamlined design, which allows for more encounters, which are most of the time a 9 out of 10, just making this more preferable to me and just more fun to play even. And sure, it's definitely flawed in many ways, especially on how rushed it is, with the cases of the bugs, the obvious glitches, and some unbalanced aspects here and there. But even so, when Ninja Gaiden 2 gets something right, it really gets it right, to a point I can brush off any critiques I have with it.
This is brilliant, but I like this.
So with that, Ninja Gaiden 2 gets 4.5 Sonias out of 5. And what a way to pay respects and tribute after Itagaki's passing. And while the game may not be perfect, it's still damn good. Godspeed, Master Ninja! You were an absolute legend. Anyway, that wraps up the second chapter of this whole marathon. Next game, however, will be quite something to talk about, as next time we'll be tackling against the brave, the bold, the ambitious, and the very divisive Ninja Gaiden 3 Razor's Edge. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down in the comments if you played this version yourself, and if you enjoyed this review. And if you're excited to see the next review, then please like the video, hit the subscribe button if you're new, and hit that notification icon if you want to stay up to date for the next review alone. I also have a special Patreon page if you'd like to support me, and you will get also some extra goodies yourself. And with that said, special thanks to my patrons, and Mad Kaiser, out.